Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. Today's demonstration is all about how to paint figures. It's a follow-up from my last video, which was easy figure placement. I showed how to place figures in your landscapes and cityscapes to the right scale and proportion. And this is a follow-up to show you how to paint figures. But first, let me just talk about proportions. The average human figure is basically 8 heads high. So let's say we draw a head and then measure down 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, in an ideal world, everybody's the same height, but that's not the case. We're all different shapes and sizes. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are skinny, and some people are stocky. So don't always try and make the figures exactly the same, but it's a good guide. And basically, if you count to the middle, that's roughly where the bottom of the torso would be. So if we say just put a torso in there, and these would be the legs. And that's it in simple terms. So to basically paint a simple figure, we put a dot for a head. Then we can add a torso. Keep it simple. Leave a little gap between the head and the shoulders because that can be the colour. And if you have the head too close or touching, sometimes it can look a little bit like the figure's got hunched shoulders. But this is just a basic, simple figure. Let's draw some legs. And if you draw one leg slightly shorter than the other, it suggests movement. And while the paint's wet, you can just get the proportions right if you've got a slightly stockier person. If you're going to paint arms, I would certainly avoid painting feet, because if you paint feet, figures tend to look too laboured. I never bother. It's up to you, but I never do it because it just makes the painting look too laboured. But if you are adding arms, let's say this guy's carrying a briefcase, the arm would hang just there, and his hand would be just below the waistline, just around the top of the thigh. So we just indicate a quick briefcase there. Or he could be carrying a coat in his other hand, so it's same thing, hand, and just suggest the coat hanging down. So that's it in a nutshell. And if you want to practice painting figures and you're not sure about how to get this proportion right without a guide, try painting 8 heads. So now you've got your 8 heads, just a question of joining them together. Just keep it vague, don't be too precise. These figures are going to be very small figures in your painting. We're not talking about doing close-up figures. This is putting figures into your painting to make it look more realistic and add some movement and scale. And then just do the legs. Simple as that. And maybe put some arms out like he's got his hands in his pockets. Some elbows. Very straightforward. One thing I've forgotten to show you, when you do paint figures, always put a shadow in if you can, because you obviously, depending on where the light's coming from in your painting, but that shadow will ground the figure rather than having it hovering in thin air. So that's something to bear in mind. Always remember to put a shadow in. Now these figures are walking away from us, but if you wanted to have a figure walking towards you, just leave a gap for a shirt, to suggest a shirt or a sweater or something. And again, maybe come a bit lower. Again, one leg slightly shorter than the other suggests movement. Don't forget the shadow. And that gap suggests that they're wearing a shirt and they're walking towards you. Obviously, I'm doing these in one colour. You would perhaps use yellow ochre or something for the head to suggest the face. I'll do that in a second. Let's continue this. What if they're not walking towards you or walking away from you? Figures that are walking tend to lean a little bit. So if you, let's have a figure going that way. Let's put a head slightly leaning and the body leading too. Slight curve on the body this time. Maybe carrying a bag. The body's slightly bigger maybe. So that slight lean and the fact that the way you've painted it with the head tilting suggests movement going sideways or at an angle. So that's another way of doing things. Now, obviously, figures don't always have to be individual figures. That you often get groups of 2 or 3 people together. So let's try that. What I would do there is do a very loose shape of maybe a couple of bodies. Let them blend together. As I said before, you may be using different colours for this. I'm just using this bluey grey just to keep things simple. And then put the heads in once you've got that shape. Suggest they're walking quite closely together. Again, one leg shorter than the other. Maybe this one's carrying a bag. Now when you bring children into the equation, obviously they're not going to be as tall, so you have to use your observation and experience. So let's put an adult holding the hand of a child. Let's give this adult, let's say it's a lady, let's give her a skirt. And there you have it. Same would be with walking a dog, same sort of thing. You would just make the dog obviously smaller. But the trick is to get the heads right. If you get the heads too big, let's draw one with a head that's miles too big. So let's do a body first. So we've got the shadows, there you go. Okay. Now let's do a head that's too big. Now that just looks wrong. That just looks totally out of scale. You could say that it's a woman with big hair, but it just doesn't look right. It doesn't sit right. So always bear that in mind. Another thing to remember with figures is sometimes they're standing still. So when people stand still, they tend to lean back a little bit. So the back's curved a little bit. So let's draw two people standing talking to each other. So I'll just draw a slight curve there and a slight curve there. Just leaning back a little bit, and the head would tilt forward because you're talking to each other. And the legs would be generally together. Same thing on the other side. Slight tilt, head tilted forward. Maybe a hand out. So this one with maybe a dress or a skirt. So you notice you've got this slight curve here and a slight. It's not too much, but it's just enough. Yeah, the back would be straighter. People lean into each other when they're talking, so or standing still. So that's something else to bear in mind. So there you have some basics. Try practicing by drawing or painting 8 heads and then joining it all together. Always remember the shadow. Remember that the arms come just below the waist to the top of the thighs, I guess. Try and get the proportions right, but as I said at the start, not everybody fits into the classic proportion of 8 heads. People walking tend to lean forward and have a bent head forward. People standing have a curve. It's all very, very basic. So just practice and see how you get on. Now let's talk a little bit more about proportions in terms of scale. So when people are further away, they're going to be smaller. In my last video, I did talk about when you're standing up, the heads will all be at eye level, generally. And when you're sitting down, it's the waist that will be at eye level. So I'll put a link. In fact, I'll put up a couple of shots from that video now to explain what I'm talking about. This one's the where all the heads line up. So as you can see, the bodies vary in size depending on how close they are to you. And this one is where you're sitting down, your view is sitting down, and all the waistlines are together. I'll put a link to that video up to the right shortly. So when the figures are further away, first of all, that you're going to see far less detail. So let's do some figures, say that quite a long way away, tiny little dot, then there's very little detail. You wouldn't even be able to distinguish individual legs this far away. Probably got that head a little bit on the big side, but say we've got a couple of figures here walking away from us in the distance. And that's the other thing I meant to mention. When you're painting figures, try and keep your the amount of water in your paint as little as possible. Try and use thicker paint, more pigment. You have more control then. So we've got these figures in the distance. Now, as I said before, the heads should be all on the same level. So say we've got some figures walking towards us. Let's put some colour in this time. The closer people get to you, the more colour you're likely to see. So again, the heads are all on the same level. Let's put a red jacket on this one and maybe a blue on this one. You'll see much more colour the closer people are to you. And just put some legs in. Forgot the shadows again. Put the legs in. They have a group of 3 people, all pretty vague, but you can see the scale. Now let's have somebody coming really close to us. Let's have a guy with a blue jacket on. He's walking towards us, so I'll leave a gap to suggest a shirt underneath. As I say, the closer people, shadows again, the closer people get to us, the more detail you'll see. Again, try and keep it to bare minimum. Let's have a couple next to this guy, even closer to us. Let's have a girl maybe with a red top on. Maybe a black skirt. Guy next to her. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just indicate that this guy is wearing a tie. And he's walking next to her like that. And is carrying a briefcase. Head in. Put the girl's head in. And we'll put some, we'll suggest the guy's wearing a short sleeve shirt with a tie. The girl's wearing a short sleeve top maybe. Slightly longer legs. Maybe make her skirt a bit darker. Just by having that skirt at a slight angle, it suggests a little bit of movement. So there you have it, some figures coming towards us, getting bigger and bigger, and a little bit more detail as they come towards us. And that's all you have to remember. If the further away they are, the less detail you see. As they come towards us, you can see a little bit more detail. Once your figures are dry, you can maybe add a few details to perhaps give a bit more context. For example, we could just give the girl some long hair. Maybe give the guy some hair as well, just to add a little bit of context. But you can only do that when the figures are really close to you. Where the further away they get, the less detail you need to put in. So just to reiterate, basic figures 8 heads high. Always put in the shadows to ground your figures and just make them look as if they're not floating in midair. If you want movement, one leg shorter than the other usually does enough to suggest that. Avoid painting feet, they always look laboured and ungainly. Try and make sure your heads are all in proportion. Don't paint them too big. If you can, leave a little gap. Doesn't always have to have a gap, but if you leave a little gap, it just suggests that there's a collar or maybe a scarf there. It just adds a little bit of detail that it would just suggest a bit of detail rather than actually painting extra detail in. And just to go over it one more time, if you want to paint, an easy way to paint the figure, just paint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 heads, and then add the body, torso, then maybe the legs. Already you're suggesting somebody walking away from you. And don't forget the shadow. And there you have it. Okay, so let me just put that in context and put it into an actual painting. I quickly sketched this generic scene of a village square. That could be France, Italy, somewhere in Europe. Very generic. Few cafes dotted around, but there are no figures in the painting. So let me just show you how I'd go about placing some figures. I'd start furthest away really, because it's easier to do that. So the eye line is roughly along this line here, just under the canopies. So let's do some distant figures first. Just little dots, no colour, just maybe a couple of people walking. Maybe one over here. As long as the heads are on the same level, it doesn't matter how big the figures are at this distance. Put some figures under the awning if you want. Maybe a waiter. Maybe some people sitting down. So they're the distant figures. Let's put some people a little bit closer. As I said before, try and keep your paint fairly strong, not too much water. It just makes it easier to do, so and to control. So let's put some figures walking into the painting, say mid distance, maybe 3 people together. Mix up some different colours. Let's say the middle one's got too much water, got a green coat, say. Perhaps the one on the left's got a sort of yellowish coat. Doesn't matter if the colours blend together. It's not important at this distance. They're too far away to be of any significance. I'll leave a gap between figures as well, because we don't all walk together nudging each other with their elbows. Suggest some legs. And the light's coming from from the left, so we'll just the shadow just going off to the right a little bit. These shadows on those distant ones. Shadows on the distant ones is less important because they're so far away, but the closer the figures get to you, the more you need to worry about shadows. And let's say we've got some people walking into the shot closer to us, so heads are on this line, so maybe one there. Let's say they've got a child with them, so we'll put a gap to allow for a child and put another head here. And maybe a child down here. Okay. So maybe a red jacket to the left. Again, at this distance, you can see, you will see colour, but it's again, it'll be all pretty vague. Again, shadow going off a little bit to the left. It's all a question of trying to determine how many figures to put in without overdoing it. Maybe we could do with a couple of figures just through the trees here. Again, get the heads on the head needs to be at 5. That's it. Get the heads more or less on the right line. Just a couple of figures together. Maybe just standing having a chat. So just both legs in and ground them. Darken that shadow there a little bit. As you can see, once you start putting figures in, the whole scene starts to come together a little bit better. Strengthen that coat there. It's in shadow. So let's have somebody walking in at an angle. Say, just running with my brush roughly where the eye line would be, and maybe put a head there and somebody walking. Maybe add a bit more colour to that one. It's a bit. Let's add some blue to that top. So maybe make the body a little bigger. As you say, just leaning forward a little bit. Let's give them some beige trousers for a change. Again, not painting any feet, just then the shadow anchor the figure to the ground. Make that darker. Obviously, if this was a a finished painting, I'll take a little bit more care with colour, but I'm just trying to demonstrate how you go about this. Strengthen this side. Again, doesn't matter if the colours bleed together. Maybe somebody walking towards us just from the cafe over here. I'm going to leave a gap, but I'll use some white gouache to indicate the top. Maybe some grey trousers there. Hands in pockets, elbows sticking out. Maybe another figure even closer to us here. So this one, lady with a skirt again. Which suggests a bit of movement. Maybe carrying a bag. Painting's now dry. I'm just going to add a few details. Yeah, that shirt that I mentioned before, maybe a scarf on the lady. Just because the sun's coming from the left, I'll just maybe put a few just touches of highlight on the left side of some of the figures. Trick is not to go over the top with this sort of thing. Maybe lighten her face a little bit. It's a bit dark. Same with him. And maybe add some dark hair for the girl. Or, I don't know. anyway, you get the idea. So, and there you have it, some figures added to the painting. It brings the square to life. As I said, it's just a quick sketch, not a finished piece of work really, but gives you the idea of how to do it. So do have a go, practice, and use that 8 heads method. Paint the 8 heads and then join them all together. It's an easy way to get to know scale, and then you can scale it up or down to suit your paintings. I do hope you found this video useful, and do give it a like if you did. It always helps with YouTube. Do subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos. I try and post as often as I can, usually once a week or so. And thanks again for watching.